The gear seemed to weigh more than normal as I ran through my final checks, giving each piece of equipment the same careful inspection I'd done thousands of times before. 12 years of deep-sea welding had taught me that being paranoid keeps you alive down there. So I tested every seal, every connection, every backup system twice. Man, 1,600 feet, Ricky said, adjusting his helmet for the third time. That's gonna be a new personal record for me. I looked over at my partner. 26 years old, and still treating every dive like an adventure instead of a job that could kill you if you messed up. His equipment looked fresh from the factory, all shiny buckles and unmarked straps. Mine had the broken-in comfort of gear that had kept me breathing through 10 years of underwater emergencies. It's just another number, I told him, though something in my chest disagreed. You follow protocol, watch your gauges, and don't get creative down there. Betty Wilson walked over with her clipboard, and that look she got when the weather data wasn't playing nice. Visibility's running about 30 feet less than we expected, she said. Current's pushing northeast at 2 knots, but it should calm down once you get below the thermocline. I nodded, but something felt off. This spot usually had decent visibility, even at depth. Betty had been coordinating surface operations longer than I'd been diving, and if she looked worried, there was probably good reason. Water temperature's running cold too, Jeff added from behind his bank of monitors. About 8 degrees below seasonal average. Ricky grinned. Good thing we've got heaters in these suits. Jeff didn't smile back. He kept staring at his screens, like the numbers were telling him something he didn't want to hear. The kid was brilliant with the technical stuff, but he worried too much about data that fell outside normal ranges. Ocean conditions changed all the time. I walked to the edge of the platform and looked down at the water. It had that thick, murky quality you sometimes got after storms, except we hadn't had any weather for the past week. The surface moved wrong too, not choppy or rough, just heavy, like it was carrying more weight than water should hold. Communications relay took a beating in that equipment failure last month, Betty continued. Company needs a full damage assessment before they decide whether to repair or replace the whole array. What kind of failure? I asked. Power surge, according to the initial report. Knocked out half the deep-sea network in this sector. That explained the rush. The company lost serious money when their underwater communication systems went down. Still, 1,600 feet was pushing the limits for this kind of inspection work. Most jobs that deep needed specialized equipment and extra safety protocols we didn't have on this vessel. Ricky was bouncing on his toes, nervous energy making him mess with his gear. How long you think we'll be down there? Depends what we find, I said. Could be 20 minutes for a visual inspection. Could be 2 hours if we need to document extensive damage. The electrical systems buzzed louder than usual as Jeff ran his final diagnostics. A strange crackling sound came from the communications array, like feedback from a microphone, but sharper. Jeff made a face and adjusted some settings, but the noise continued. That normal? I asked. Probably just interference from the damaged relay, he said, but he kept messing with the controls. I'm getting some weird readings on the sonar too. Might be thermal layers playing tricks with the sound waves. Betty checked her watch. Tide's optimal for the next 3 hours. After that, current picks up and we'll have to scrub the mission. I looked at Ricky, who was trying to hide his nervousness behind that eager smile. The kid had talent and good instincts, but deep water was different from the shallow water jobs he'd been working. Pressure did things to your head down there. Made you see movement that wasn't there, hear sounds that couldn't exist. You sure you're ready for this depth? I asked him. Absolutely, he said, too fast. I've been studying the procedures. practicing with the emergency protocols. I'm good to go. The thing was, studying and practice only got you so far. Real deep-water experience came from surviving situations that weren't in any manual, learning to trust your equipment when every instinct told you something was wrong. I strapped on my helmet and ran through the communication check with Jeff. My voice came back clear through the speakers, but underneath it I could hear that electrical buzzing, like static from a radio tuned between stations. Comms are solid, Jeff reported. All monitoring systems show green across the board. Betty ran through the emergency ascent procedures and decompression schedules one last time. Standard stuff, but she covered every detail twice over, like she was trying to talk herself into believing nothing would go wrong. The water looked black as we got ready to go in, murky and thick in a way that made my stomach twist. 12 years of diving had taught me to pay attention when something felt off, but we had a job to finish in gear that showed all green. Remember, I told Ricky as we moved to the platform edge, we go down together, we come up together. You see anything that doesn't look right, you tell me immediately. He nodded, but I could see the excitement in his eyes. He thought this was going to be the dive that proved he belonged with the experienced crews. I hoped he was right. The water closed over our heads with that familiar rush of pressure and muffled sound. As we started going down into the growing darkness, that electrical buzzing followed us, carried somehow through the water itself. The water grew dense and strange around us as we dropped past 800 feet, like we were sinking through something heavier than the ocean should be. My lights barely cut through the murk, creating this weird tunnel of visibility that felt more like looking through dirty glass than clear water. Man, this visibility is garbage, Ricky said, his voice crackling through the comms. He was trying to sound casual, but I could hear that edge creeping in. Thought you said this spot usually had decent sight lines. It does. I checked my depth gauge, 820 feet and still dropping. Something stirred up the bottom. Fish bones drifted past my helmet like snow. Except fish bones had no business being this deep. These weren't the tiny skeletons you'd expect from deep water species either. Some of these looked big, from fish that lived closer to the surface where the water was warm and full of life. Betty's voice cut through the static. You're at 850 feet. Descent rate holding steady at 30 feet per minute. How's the visibility down there? Poor, I reported. Maybe 15 feet max. Copy that. Jeff's showing some interference on the sonar, probably thermal layers. But it wasn't thermal layers making my temperature gauge jump around like a broken thermometer. The readout kept spiking from 42 degrees down to 36, then back up again. Water didn't change temperature that fast unless something was seriously wrong with the equipment. Peyton, you seeing this current? Ricky's voice had lost some of its forced confidence. Feels like something's pushing up from below. He was right. Instead of the steady downward flow we'd expected, strange updrafts kept hitting us, like something massive was moving around down there beneath our target zone. The current would push against us for a few seconds, then stop completely, then start again from a different direction. I checked my instruments again. Everything showed normal except for the temperature readings and an odd vibration in my suit's pressure sensors. Betty, what's Jeff showing on the bottom sonar? A pause, then Jeff's voice came through with more static than usual. Getting some odd returns down there, showing structures that don't match the geological survey. What kind of structures? Hard to tell. Could be rock formations, could be debris. The readings keep shifting. At 1,100 feet, Ricky's light caught something glinting on the seafloor below us. Hey, check that out. Looks like metal scattered around down there. I angled my beam to follow his. He was right. Pieces of something metallic were spread across the ocean floor in patterns that looked too deliberate to be random debris. The shapes were clean and geometric, like parts of machinery that had been carefully placed rather than dumped or wrecked. Probably just old equipment, I told him, but my gut disagreed. The pieces looked fresh, unmarked by the corrosion that should have eaten through any metal left on the seafloor for more than a few months. We passed 1,200 feet, and the pressure felt different than it ever had before. Not just the normal crushing weight of all that water above us, but something else. Like the ocean itself was pressing down harder, trying to squeeze us into something smaller. Jesus, Ricky muttered. This depth is no joke. Stay focused on your breathing, I told him. Don't think about the pressure. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. 12 years of deep water work, and I'd never experienced pressure like this. Never had that feeling that the ocean was actively trying to crush me, instead of just being heavy. At 1,400 feet, our lights finally caught the communications relay. Holy shit, Ricky whispered. The damage was way worse than anyone had reported. The main support structure looked like it had been twisted by something with incredible strength, metal beams bent into spirals that shouldn't be possible. Sections of the relay housing dangled at angles that defied all engineering logic, and the primary antenna array had vanished entirely, not snapped off but gone, as if something had deliberately extracted it. Betty, we've got eyes on the target, I reported. The damage is extensive, way beyond what we were briefed on. Copy that. Can you give us a preliminary assessment? I moved closer to the wreckage, my lights showing more damage that shouldn't exist. The metal wasn't just bent, it was shaped, formed into curves and angles that looked almost decorative. Like something had been playing with the relay instead of just destroying it. This wasn't a power surge, I said into my comm. This looks like something tore the whole thing apart. The water around the relay felt colder, and my temperature gauge was acting up again, bouncing between readings that made no sense. Ricky swam toward what remained of the antenna array, his light beam trembling slightly. Peyton, he said, his voice smaller now. I don't think we're alone down here. I followed his light and saw what he meant. In the distance, just at the edge of what we could see, something was moving through the water with too much purpose to be debris or fish. Something that looked like it was swimming toward us. The metal looked wrong up close. Not just damaged, but eaten away in these strange spiral patterns that didn't make sense for saltwater exposure. I'd seen plenty of equipment failures over the years, but this relay looked like it had been sitting in acid instead of seawater. I'm going to check out what's left of the antenna array, Ricky said, his voice steadier now that we had something concrete to focus on. Copy that. I'll examine the foundation anchors. I moved toward the base of the structure, running my lights along the massive concrete blocks that should have kept the relay stable on the seafloor. The first thing I noticed was how the sediment kept moving around my fins, like something underneath was breathing. Not the normal settling you'd expect from our movements, but deliberate disturbance coming from below. My beam caught deep scratches in the metal support beams, parallel cuts that ran too straight and clean to be accidental damage. Whatever made these marks had serious cutting power and knew exactly what it was doing. Betty, we're seeing extensive structural damage down here, I reported. This wasn't any power surge. A strange noise began filtering through my helmet speakers, deep and haunting like whale song, but with overtones that made my teeth ache. I fiddled with my comm settings, but the noise continued, seeming to rise from the water itself, rather than the radio. Peyton, these cables are cut clean through, Ricky called out. I mean surgically clean. No fraying, no burn marks from electrical failure. You sure? Positive. Someone or something sliced right through them. Jeff's voice crackled through with more urgency than usual. "How's the structural integrity looking? We're getting some weird readings up here." I moved around to the relay's main housing and found a section that made my stomach drop. The metal panel had been ripped away from the inside, bent outward like something had forced its way out of the sealed compartment. The edges were sharp and twisted, but what really got to me were the dark stains covering everything inside. "Ricky, come take a look at this." He swam over, his light joining mine to brighten the damaged housing. The stains weren't rust, they had a living quality, thick and dark like old blood, but with a texture that seemed wrong for this depth and pressure. "What the hell is that stuff?" he asked. "No idea, but it shouldn't be here." My temperature gauge spiked suddenly, jumping from 38 degrees to 52, then crashed back down to near freezing. The rapid change made my suit's heating system kick in with a loud buzz. Something moved in my peripheral vision, just a shadow at the edge of my light beam. I turned quickly, but saw only drifting sediment and the endless dark beyond our work area. "You see that?" I asked Ricky. "See what?" "Movement. Off to the left." The seafloor kept moving beneath us, stirring up small clouds of silt that made it even harder to see. Every time I thought I'd found solid ground, the bottom would give way slightly, like we were walking on something soft instead of packed sand. I swept my light along more of the relay's damaged sections, finding the same thing everywhere: metal ripped from the inside out, those clean parallel cuts, and dark organic stains that had no business being 1,600 feet underwater. "Betty, we need to document everything down here," I said into my comm. "This damage pattern is unlike anything I've seen before." "Copy that. How much time do you need?" I looked at the twisted wreckage around us, the shifting seafloor, and Ricky's nervous movements as he tried to make sense of the damage that shouldn't have been possible. "More time than we've got." I walked around to the relay's main support beam when Ricky's voice just stopped. Not like he finished talking. It cut off right in the middle of a word about the cable damage. "Ricky," I called out, angling my light toward where he'd been working. "You copy?" His light was still on, pointing at something wedged against the twisted metal framework. I swam over and immediately wished I hadn't. A diver was trapped there, pressed against the relay structure like the current had pinned him in place. His faceplate was caved inward, jagged glass pointing into the helmet, and the whole thing was filled with dark fluid that moved too slowly to be just water. It swirled around inside like blood mixed with silt, thick and wrong. "Jesus Christ," I muttered, then keyed my comm. "Betty, we've got a body down here." "Say again?" "Dead diver, wedged against the relay structure. Looks like he's been here a while." The suit didn't match anything I recognized from our company or the other outfits working this sector. The design looked old, really old, like something from diving manuals I'd seen in training decades ago. But the material wasn't worn down the way it should be after sitting on the ocean floor. It looked almost new, just filled with that dark, swirling mess. "Negative on any scheduled divers within 50 miles of your location." Betty's voice came back sharp and immediate. "Are you certain it's a diver?" I moved closer, my light showing details I didn't want to see. The suit's joints were bent at angles that made my stomach turn, arms twisted backward, legs folded in ways human bones don't allow. Inside the broken helmet, floating in all that dark fluid, were fragments of something white. Could have been bone, could have been coral, could have been something else entirely. "Positive identification on diving equipment," I reported, trying to keep my voice steady. "But the suit design is unfamiliar. Looks vintage." Ricky finally found his voice. "How long you think he's been down here?" Before I could answer, the corpse twitched. Just once, but clear movement. The right arm jerked toward me with mechanical precision, almost like a broken puppet. The motion was too sharp, too controlled for something that should have been dead weight in the current. "Did you see that?" Ricky's breathing picked up, coming through the comms in rapid bursts. "See what?" Jeff's voice cut in from the surface. "We need clarification on the body's identity. Any visible name tags or company markings." I backed away as the thing's helmet moved slightly. Through the cracked faceplate, past all that swirling dark fluid, something that might have been an eye socket seemed to track my movement. The remaining glass bounced my light back at me, but underneath it, in the darkness of the helmet, I could swear something was looking. The damaged suit started making noise, a low, grinding sound like metal under pressure that was way too much for this depth. The sound came from inside the suit, not from the equipment or the relay structure. "Peyton, we need to get away from that thing," Ricky said, his voice tight with panic. He was right. Every instinct I'd developed in 12 years of deep water work was screaming at me to put distance between us and whatever was wearing that vintage diving suit. But I couldn't stop staring at the way its helmet kept turning, following our lights with the patience of something that had been waiting down here for decades. The thing's arm kept reaching for me, joints grinding like rusted hinges, when a voice crept through my helmet speakers. "Peyton, Ricky." It stretched our names out like taffy, each syllable dripping with the sound of water through corroded pipes. The voice had weight to it, thick and wrong, like someone talking underwater while drowning. "Betty, you copy that transmission?" I asked, backing away from the corpse. "Copy what?" "Your signal's clear. Requesting status update." The wet voice kept going, getting stronger. "Don't leave me here." It was coming from the dead diver's helmet now, that broken faceplate somehow making sound even though it was filled with dark fluid. The thing's arm reached toward me with robotic jerks, elbow bending backward in a way that made my skin crawl. "Ricky, we need to move. Now." But Ricky was already scrambling toward our ascent line, his breathing coming in sharp bursts through the comm. "This is wrong. This is all wrong," he kept repeating. My depth gauge started spinning like a broken compass. Temperature readings jumped from freezing to crazy highs, then crashed back down. Every instrument on my suit was going nuts, but the equipment felt fine. No loose connections, no obvious failures. "Jeff, we're getting massive instrument malfunctions down here," I reported. "Negative on equipment problems. All your readings show normal parameters." That's when I saw the lights. 6 or 7 beams cutting through the murk in the distance, moving across the seafloor with a grace that shouldn't exist at this depth. No diver moved that smoothly 1,600 feet down. The pressure alone forced you into careful, deliberate steps, but these figures moved like they were swimming through air. "Ricky, you see those lights?" "Yeah, I see them." His voice was tight with panic. "They're coming this way." The approaching divers wore suits that didn't match, pieces from different time periods thrown together like someone had ransacked a diving museum. One had an old brass helmet stuck onto modern gear. Another wore equipment I'd never seen before, sleek and biological looking. The front figure's helmet caught our lights and bounced them back with a surface so smooth it looked like polished metal. No faceplate, no glass, just blank reflection that somehow followed our movements. "Jeff, we've got multiple divers approaching our position," I called up, requesting identification. Static crackled through the response. "No other divers scheduled in your sector. We're losing telemetry from both your suits." "What do you mean losing telemetry?" "Your life support readings just went dark. Equipment shows operational, but we're not receiving data." The wet voice whispered again, closer now. "Come back to us, Peyton." The dead diver's helmet turned toward me with a grinding sound like metal under stress. Through the broken faceplate, something that might have been an eye socket locked onto me. The approaching figures spread out in a pattern too coordinated for coincidence. They moved with purpose, circling our work area while keeping perfect formation. One of them raised an arm and pointed straight at me. That's when Ricky snapped completely, throwing out all protocol as he kicked hard toward the surface. I kicked hard toward the elevator platform, my training screaming at me to maintain controlled ascent while pure terror demanded I get the hell out of there as fast as possible. Behind me, those 6 figures moved through the water with unnatural grace, closing distance like they weren't fighting 1,600 feet of crushing pressure. "Ricky, get to the platform now," I called out. But he was already there, his panicked breathing flooding the comm channel with rapid gasps. The front figure's blank helmet tracked our movement with predatory focus. No faceplate, no glass, just polished metal that somehow followed us like it could see. The thing moved faster than any human could at this depth, its limbs cutting through the water without the clumsy resistance that made every motion a struggle for us. Ricky reached the elevator first, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the emergency controls. "They're here. They're here," he kept saying, his voice breaking with panic. I grabbed the platform's safety rail just as one of the creatures sped up beyond anything physically possible. It shot through the water like a torpedo, slamming into Ricky with brutal force that sent him spinning sideways into the darkness beyond our lights. His screams stopped mid-breath. "Ricky!" I swung my beam toward where he'd disappeared, but the murky water had swallowed him completely. "Ricky, respond." My suit display showed his readings flatlined. No heartbeat, no breathing, no suit pressure, just dead signals across the board. "Peyton, we're losing Ricky's telemetry." Betty's voice crackled through with sharp alarm. "What's your status down there?" I slammed the emergency ascent button, and the elevator's motors kicked in with a grinding whir. The platform lurched upward, but through the observation window I could see the remaining figures circling the base of the structure like sharks. Some walked along the seafloor with deliberate steps, while others drifted through the water column, their movements working together in ways that made my skin crawl. "Emergency ascent in progress," I reported, watching my depth gauge start its climb from 1,600 feet. "Ricky's down. Something took him." The wet voice came back through my helmet speakers, but this time it wasn't alone. Dozens of drowning voices speaking together, surrounding me from all directions. "Come back to us, Peyton." "Jeff, I need sonar on whatever's beneath our position," I called out, pressing myself against the far side of the elevator as the figures grew smaller below. "Sonar's going crazy down there." Jeff's voice came back tight with confusion. "I'm reading massive interference. Whatever's causing it is big." That's when one of the creatures broke away from the group. It came after me, somehow matching the speed of the mechanically powered elevator. The thing moved through the water like it was born there, rising next to my platform, with smooth, easy movement that made no sense according to any physics I knew. At 1,500 feet, it reached the observation window. The blank helmet pressed against the reinforced glass, and I found myself staring at my own terrified reflection in its polished surface. Behind that reflection, something darker seemed to move and writhe, shadows swimming in mercury. Then it started tapping. Slow, deliberate taps against the window. One tap as we passed 1,400 feet. Another at 1,300. The sound came through the water and metal with crystal clarity, each impact precise and measured. It was counting down our climb, marking every 100 feet with robotic persistence. "Betty, something's following the elevator up," I reported, unable to look away from that blank helmet. "It's keeping pace with the ascent." "That's impossible. Nothing can match elevator speed at that depth. But there it was, helmet pressed against the window, marking our progress with steady rhythm. At 1,200 feet, the sound got louder. At 1,100, I could make out its shape better through the dark water. Looked human but wasn't, with joints that twisted ways no person's body should. The tapping kept going, patient and endless, marking the shrinking distance between me and the surface while that empty helmet threw my own face back at me. The tapping got louder as we went past 800 feet, each hit against the window stronger than the one before. The thing's helmet pushed against the glass hard enough to make the tough material creak, and I could see thin cracks starting to spread out from where it touched. "Betty, the window's taking damage," I reported, watching those cracks spread like frozen lightning. "Whatever this thing is, it's not giving up." "Peyton, your ascent rate is too fast." Jeff's voice cut through with sharp concern. "You need to slow down or you'll get the bends." But slowing down meant more time with this nightmare keeping pace beside me, its blank helmet showing my terrified face while something dark moved behind that polished surface. At 700 feet, I could see its body more clearly through the murky water, definitely human-shaped but wrong in ways that made my brain hurt to process. Its joints bent backward at the elbows and knees, moving with smooth grace that no human skeleton could achieve. The diving suit looked like it was made from pieces of different eras welded together, brass fittings mixed with materials I couldn't recognize. "I'm starting emergency decompression protocols," I announced, knowing the risks but needing to get away from this thing before it broke through completely. The tapping turned into wild pounding as we reached 600 feet. Every hit sent shakes through the elevator's frame, and I could hear the metal supports creaking under pressure they weren't built to take. "Peyton, talk to me." Betty's voice sounded distant through growing static. "What's your status?" "The window's failing," I said, pressing myself against the far wall as another crack shot across the glass. "This thing's trying to get inside." At 500 feet, something changed. The creature's suit started showing stress fractures along the seams, dark fluid leaking out in thin streams that spread into the water like ink. The dropping pressure was affecting whatever lived inside that old diving gear. The pounding grew frantic, wild, like the thing knew it was running out of time. At 400 feet, I could see its helmet developing a crack down the center, more of that dark fluid oozing out under pressure. "Jeff, how much interference are you reading?" I called out, watching the creature's movements become more erratic. "Massive spikes across all frequencies," he responded. "Whatever's down there is affecting every instrument we have." 300 feet. The thing's body was falling apart now, chunks of its suit flaking off like old paint. But it kept pounding on the window with mechanical stubbornness, each hit weaker than the last but still trying to break through. At 200 feet, the tapping suddenly stopped. The creature hung motionless beside the elevator for a moment, its cracked helmet turning as if watching me through the damaged glass. Then it lifted one arm with careful slowness, fingers spread wide. "No, no, no," I whispered, knowing what was coming. At 100 feet, it drove its hand straight through the window. The glass burst inward in a shower of pieces and seawater, but the creature's body was already ripping apart from the pressure change. Its suit tore open like spoiled fruit, dumping black liquid and chunks of something that could have been meat into the flooding elevator. The ocean rushed in through the shattered window as the thing's helmet split completely in half, showing nothing inside but spinning darkness and the sound of that slimy voice calling my name one last time before the pressure ripped it apart. I was drowning in 1,600 feet of ocean, and whatever was left of the nightmare that had chased me up from the depths. The elevator hit the surface with a grinding crash that sent shockwaves through the support vessel. I sat there dripping, chunks of something dark and wet sliding off my diving suit onto the metal floor. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. "Get him out of there!" Betty's voice cut through the chaos as crew members swarmed the damaged platform. The observation window was completely gone, just jagged glass teeth around an opening that let 1,600 feet of ocean pour in during our ascent. Two guys grabbed me under the arms and hauled me toward the decompression chamber. My legs felt like rubber, barely supporting my weight as we moved across the deck. Dark fluid dripped from my suit in thick drops that splattered against the white deck plating, leaving stains that looked wrong in the afternoon sunlight. "Peyton, stay with me," Betty said, walking alongside as they carried me. "We need to get you through decompression protocols." I tried to speak but only managed to croak. The taste of salt water and something else, something metallic and organic, filled my mouth. Through the chamber's small window, I watched the crew examining the elevator's wreckage with puzzled faces. Dr. Farley appeared with his medical kit, already pulling on latex gloves. "Let's get him sealed in and start the cycle," he said, studying the dark substance coating my gear. "What is this material?" "I don't know," Betty replied, helping guide me into the chamber. It came up with him. The heavy door sealed shut with a sharp hiss, leaving me alone in the cramped space. Through the thick glass, I could see everyone moving around outside like actors in a silent movie. Dr. Farley scraped samples of the dark fluid into specimen containers, holding them up to the light with a confused expression. Betty knocked on the window and pressed her face close to the glass. "Peyton, can you hear me? What happened to Ricky down there?" I opened my mouth to answer, but how could I explain what I'd seen? That things with blank helmets had surrounded us? That one of them took Ricky and followed me up, counting down our ascent with mechanical taps before tearing itself apart trying to get inside? "Equipment failure," I finally managed to say, the words feeling like lies even as they left my mouth. Something went wrong with the relay. Jeff showed up next to Betty, tablet in hand, swiping through data with quick finger movements. "The dive computer logs are messed up," he said, loud enough for me to hear through the chamber walls. "Huge gaps in the telemetry, and the readings we do have don't make any sense." "What kind of readings?" Betty asked. "Temperature spikes that should be impossible at depth. Pressure variations that would indicate..." Jeff paused, staring at his screen. "Well, they'd indicate the presence of large moving objects. But that can't be right." Dr. Farley finished collecting his samples and moved to the chamber's communication panel. "Peyton, I need you to describe your symptoms. Any joint pain, trouble breathing, problems with your vision?" "Problems with my vision." I almost laughed, but it came out as a choked sound instead. "I saw things," I said. "Down there, other divers." "Hallucinations are common with rapid decompression," Dr. Farley noted, writing on his clipboard. "Nitrogen narcosis can persist even during ascent." Through the porthole, I watched Betty reviewing the radio recordings on Jeff's equipment. She shook her head after listening for several minutes. Nothing unusual in the communications log. Just standard dive chatter until the emergency ascent. But I remembered the wet voice calling my name, the chorus of drowning sounds that had filled my helmet speakers. How could there be no record of that? The decompression chamber buzzed around me, slowly adjusting pressure in careful increments. But every few minutes, I heard something else underneath the mechanical sounds. A soft tapping, rhythmic and patient, like fingernails against metal. I pressed my face to the window, looking around the deck outside. The crew kept working, checking out the elevator's twisted frame and writing down the damage. Nobody else seemed to hear the tapping. "Betty, I called out, my voice muffled by the chamber walls. "The search teams. When they go down looking for Ricky." She stepped toward the window. "What about them?" "They won't find him." The words came out flat and certain. "Whatever took him, it's not going to give him back." Betty exchanged a look with Dr. Farley. "Peyton, you've been through severe trauma. Your perception of events may not be entirely accurate." The tapping got louder, more demanding. I turned toward the sound and saw something that made my blood freeze. Pressed against the chamber's back window was a face, pale and twisted with dark fluid streaming from its mouth and empty eye sockets. I scrambled backward, hitting the opposite wall of the chamber. "There! Do you see it?" Betty and Dr. Farley hurried over to see what I was pointing at, but the porthole showed nothing except empty ocean stretching beyond the ship's railing. "There's nothing there, Peyton," Dr. Farley said gently. "You're experiencing post-traumatic hallucinations. It's a normal response to what you've been through." Normal. I wanted to scream that nothing about this was normal, that Ricky was gone, and something impossible had followed me up from the depths. But the face had disappeared, leaving only my reflection staring back from the dark glass. Betty started writing her incident report, pen moving across the page in quick, efficient strokes. Equipment malfunction, possible nitrogen narcosis, diving accident in dangerous conditions, all the official language that would bury the truth under paperwork and red tape. The tapping went on, patient and endless, counting down something I couldn't understand while the search teams got ready to go down into waters that would never give up their secrets. I sat in Dr. Farley's office watching him write the final notes in my file. His pen scratched across the paper with mechanical precision, documenting symptoms that fit neatly into medical textbooks: decompression sickness, nitrogen narcosis, acute stress reaction, all the official terms that explained away what couldn't be explained. "The hallucinations are consistent with rapid ascent trauma," he said without looking up. "Visual and auditory disturbances, paranoid ideation, false memory formation. Nothing unusual for someone who's experienced what you have." Nothing unusual. I wanted to grab his clipboard and throw it across the room, but my hand stayed folded in my lap. The dark stains on my diving suit had been scrubbed away, studied, and dismissed as rotted organic matter mixed with deep-sea bacteria. Standard seafloor sediment, according to the lab report. "The psychological evaluation recommends extended leave," Dr. Farley continued. "No diving activities until you complete a full psychiatric review. The company's insurance requires it." My diving certification was suspended. 12 years of experience, gone with a signature on a medical form. I nodded like it made sense, like losing everything I'd worked for was just another step in recovery. Betty knocked on the door and stepped inside, her face carefully neutral. "Peyton, you have a minute?" We walked to her office in silence. She closed the door and pointed to a chair, but I stayed standing. Through her window, I could see the harbor where search teams had spent 3 days looking for Ricky's body. They'd found nothing. "The investigation's complete," she said, settling behind her desk. "Equipment malfunction caused the relay damage. The conditions down there were more dangerous than we realized." "What about the other divers I saw?" Betty's expression didn't change. "Jeff analyzed every piece of sonar data from that day. Rock formations, thermal layers, maybe some debris from old shipping accidents. Nothing that would indicate human presence." I stared at her, looking for any sign that she believed me. But her eyes held only professional sympathy, the kind reserved for employees who'd cracked under pressure. "The company's offering a generous severance package," she continued. "Full medical coverage, counseling services, job placement assistance when you're ready." "When I'm ready." Like I'd ever be ready to pretend that Ricky died from equipment failure instead of being ripped apart by something that shouldn't exist. "Take some time," Betty said. "Get your head straight. This job takes everything from you if you let it." I signed the paperwork because there wasn't anything else to do. My career was finished either way. The insurance investigators had already questioned me for hours, looking for negligence or sabotage, anything that would push responsibility away from the company. They'd found nothing because there wasn't anything to find except what really happened, and what really happened didn't fit their forms. Jeff caught me in the parking lot as I loaded my personal stuff into my truck. His tablet was tucked under his arm, and he looked like he hadn't slept since the incident. "Those readings I mentioned," he said quietly. "The anomalous sonar returns?" I stopped loading and turned to face him. "Yeah?" "They're gone from the official logs, scrubbed clean." He glanced around the empty lot. "But I kept backup files, personal copies." "What did they show?" Jeff pulled out his tablet and flicked through screens of data. Large objects moving in coordinated patterns, heat signatures that don't match any known marine life, and this. He showed me a sonar image that looked like a three-dimensional map of the seafloor. The relay station appeared as a twisted wreck, exactly as we'd found it. But surrounding the structure were figures that looked almost human, arranged in a perfect circle around the damaged equipment. "How many?" I asked. 7 distinct contacts. They appeared on sonar for exactly 43 minutes, then vanished completely. The same amount of time Ricky and I had been on the bottom. I stared at the screen, watching the timestamp tick through those minutes, while the shapes stayed in position around the relay. "The official report says equipment interference," Jeff continued. "Thermal layers causing false returns. But I've been analyzing deep-sea sonar for 5 years. This isn't interference." He closed the tablet and looked directly at me. "Whatever you saw down there, it was real. The instruments don't lie, even when people want them to." I wanted to thank him, to tell him how much it meant to have someone believe me, but I couldn't get the words out. Jeff was risking his job by showing me this data, and we both knew it. "Be careful with those files," I said instead. He nodded and walked back toward the building, leaving me alone with my truck full of diving gear I'd never use again. The official story was locked in place now. Ricky Mills, age 26, died in a diving accident caused by equipment failure and dangerous conditions. The relay station took damage from power surges and structural stress. Case closed. But I knew what really happened. Something lived in the deep water. Something that had been lurking in the darkness around that relay station. It had taken Ricky and almost got me too, counting down our rise to the surface with steady taps against reinforced glass. The hardest part wasn't losing my career or dealing with everyone's doubt. The hardest part was knowing it was still down there, lurking in the abyss where my friend had died. And someday, when everything lined up just right and another crew went down to those depths, it would be ready for them too. I drove away from the harbor with Ricky's death certificate in my glove compartment and the sound of tapping repeating in my memory, patient and endless, counting down to something I couldn't grasp. The apartment felt like a tomb. 3 weeks since they'd pulled me out of that elevator, and I still couldn't get used to the silence. No engine noise, no radio chatter, no hiss of compressed air. Just the steady drip of water from somewhere in the walls that the landlord swore didn't exist. I'd given up trying to sleep in the bedroom. The mattress felt too much like floating, and every time I closed my eyes, the tapping started. Always the same rhythm, slow, deliberate, counting down from some unimaginable depth. So I stayed on the couch, laptop open, scrolling through maritime accident reports until my eyes burned. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I kept drinking it anyway. Caffeine was the only thing keeping the dreams away, and they were getting worse. Last night I'd felt water rising around my ankles while I slept, cold and thick like the ocean at 1,600 feet. I'd woken up gasping, but the floor was bone dry. My phone buzzed. Betty's name showed up on the screen, and I let it ring 4 times before picking up. "How are you holding up?" she asked, using that careful tone people reserved for broken things. "Fine," I lied, minimizing a browser window full of diving accident statistics. "Getting better every day." "That's good to hear. Dr. Farley mentioned you missed your last appointment." I had missed it. Sitting in that office while he scribbled notes about my crumbling mental state felt like drowning all over again. "I'll reschedule. The company's still covering all your medical expenses. Whatever you need." Whatever I needed was for someone to believe me, but that wasn't covered by insurance. "Thanks, Betty. I appreciate everything you've done." The conversation died there, both of us knowing it was pointless. She'd moved on to other crews, other dives, filing my incident under lessons learned and safety improvements. The official report had been cleaned up and distributed, warning about the dangers of rapid decompression and the psychological effects of deep water emergencies. After she hung up, I went back to my research. The details were there if you knew how to look. Diving accidents near deep-sea installations, always explained by equipment failure or human error. Missing divers whose bodies were never found. Sonar readings dismissed as heat interference. I'd found 17 similar incidents over the past 40 years. Different companies, different locations, but always the same depth range. Always near communication relays or monitoring stations. The survivors, when there were any, talked about seeing things, broken equipment, and meeting divers who shouldn't have been there. Every single case got closed with identical explanations: nitrogen narcosis, decompression sickness, acute stress reaction. The bathroom faucet started dripping again, that steady beat that made my skin crawl. I'd called maintenance twice, but they couldn't find any leaks. The noise seemed to come from inside the walls themselves, like something was moving through the pipes. I got up to check the mirror above the sink, and for just a second, I saw more than my own reflection. A shadow behind my shoulder, tall and wrong, with joints that bent the wrong way. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. The laptop chimed with a new email. I'd been reaching out to other survivors, the few who'd been willing to talk. Most ignored my messages, but sometimes someone would respond. This one was from a commercial diver in Alaska who'd lost his partner near an oil platform in 1987. "They told me it was equipment failure too," he wrote. "But I know what I saw down there. Things that shouldn't exist, moving through water, like they owned it. The tapping started 3 days after I got back to the surface. 35 years later, it still hasn't stopped." I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The harbor spread out below, dark water catching the city lights. Somewhere out there, search teams were still combing the area for Ricky's body, following standard procedures that would never bring him home. A glow moved beneath the surface, too bright and too deliberate to be a fish. It traveled along the shipping channel toward deeper water, joined by another glow, then another. They moved together like a convoy heading out to sea. The rhythm in my dreams wasn't random. It was counting down to something, marking time until some boundary was crossed. And whatever lived in the depths was patient enough to wait. I pressed my palm against the window glass, watching the lights fade into the darkness beyond the harbor mouth. The cold surface reminded me of the observation window in a diving elevator, and for a moment, I could swear I heard that wet voice calling my name through the building's pipes. The dark fluid samples had vanished from the lab. No record of analysis, No documentation of their makeup. Just another piece of evidence that had been quietly erased, filed away where it couldn't raise uncomfortable questions. But I remembered the taste of that water, metallic and organic, like blood mixed with seawater. I remembered how it moved, too thick for normal ocean currents. And I remembered the things that had come from it, wearing diving suits from different decades, moving with incredible grace through crushing pressure. The tapping bounced through the apartment walls, patient and endless, counting down to something I couldn't grasp. But I was starting to listen, starting to recognize the rhythm that linked me to whatever waited in the depths. Ricky was gone. My career was finished, and everyone thought I was losing it. But the lights in the harbor kept moving, following patterns that had nothing to do with shipping schedules or boat traffic. Something was coming up from the deep, and it knew exactly where to find me.